In 1932, doctors told 400 men in rural Alabama they were being treated for something called bad blood. It wasn't a real medical term. It was a phrase locals used for almost any ailment: fatigue, anemia, and syphilis. The doctors knew exactly which one they meant. The men did not. This was the United States Public Health Service, working with the Tuskegee Institute, launching what would become the longest unethical medical experiment in American history. If you've ever wondered why a signed consent form sits between you and almost every medical procedure, this is where that requirement came from. The study recruited 399 black men already infected with syphilis, alongside 200 more without the disease, to serve as a comparison group. Most were poor sharecroppers who had rarely, if ever, seen a doctor. In exchange for participating, they were promised free medical exams, free hot meals on testing days, and, crucially, money toward their own burial. For men with almost nothing, a guaranteed funeral was an offer worth taking. To keep the men coming back for 4 decades, the Public Health Service relied heavily on one woman, a black nurse named Eunice Rivers, trusted throughout the community. She became the human face of the study, the reason so many men stayed loyal to it. What the men were never told was the actual name of their disease, or that it was spreading through their bodies, untreated, on purpose. Early treatments for syphilis were harsh and only partially effective. That much researchers could almost justify. What came next, they could not. In 1947, penicillin became the standard cure for syphilis, a short course of the drug clearing the infection entirely. The Public Health Service didn't offer it to the men. They actively worked to keep them from getting it elsewhere, coordinating with local doctors and draft boards to make sure participants weren't accidentally treated, including for military service. For 25 more years after a cure existed, the study continued exactly as designed: watching, not treating. Men went blind. Men suffered severe neurological damage. Some infected their wives. Some fathered children born with congenital syphilis. Researchers documented every stage and published the results in medical journals, with almost no objection from the wider scientific community. By some estimates, as many as 128 of the original participants died from syphilis or its complications before the study finally ended. It didn't end because someone in charge had a change of heart. A Public Health Service employee named Peter Buxton first raised objections internally in 1966. In 1969, a CDC review panel examined his complaint and voted to continue the study anyway. Unable to change anything from the inside, Buxton leaked the story to a journalist named Jean Heller in 1972. Her report ran on the front page of newspapers across the country the very next day. The public reaction was immediate and furious. Within months, a Senate subcommittee was holding hearings. The study was shut down. A class action lawsuit followed, resulting in a settlement of roughly $10 million for survivors and their families, along with a promise of free healthcare for life, eventually extended to their wives and children. The more lasting consequence came 2 years later. In 1974, Congress passed the National Research Act, creating the modern system of institutional review boards that now oversees virtually every piece of human research conducted in the country. A federal commission convened afterward produced what became known as the Belmont Report, laying out 3 principles that still govern research ethics today: respect for the individual, doing no unnecessary harm, and treating people fairly, regardless of who they are. Every consent form you've ever signed before a blood draw, a clinical trial, or a psychology study traces its existence directly back to this one experiment. It took until 1997 for the government to formally apologize. President Bill Clinton stood in the White House and apologized to the 8 remaining survivors by name, calling what happened deeply, profoundly, morally wrong. The last participant died in 2004, 72 years after the study began. The damage didn't end with the men who were studied. Surveys conducted decades later still found measurably lower trust in medical institutions among Black Americans, a gap researchers have directly linked back to Tuskegee. Generations after most involved had already died. It surfaces in something as current as vaccination rates, and something as basic as whether a patient believes their own doctor is telling them the truth. So somewhere between one Alabama sharecropper agreeing to a free physical exam and the paperwork you fill out today before a routine blood test, there is a straight, unbroken line. The rules that protect you in a hospital or a research lab weren't designed in a boardroom out of foresight. They were written afterward, as a kind of apology, for 400 men who were never given a real choice. Every safeguard that exists today exists because once there wasn't one, and it took 40 years. and one man willing to break the silence before anybody was forced to build it. Nurse Rivers stayed with the program until the very end, in 1972. She always said she believed she was helping the men she cared for. History has never fully settled whether that belief makes the story better or worse. Some of the doctors involved went on to long, respected careers. Their names remained on medical buildings and awards for decades afterward. Nobody involved in running the study was ever criminally charged. The only consequence for most of them was that the study finally had to stop, which raises an uncomfortable question about every rule that came afterward. Do the safeguards exist to prevent harm, or mostly to prevent it from ever becoming public again? Both answers can be true, and the men in Alabama never got to weigh in on either one. Your own medical file today carries a quiet echo of theirs, a line on a form that says someone explained the risks to you, and that you agreed freely before anything was done. That single sentence exists because, for 40 years, nobody asked 400 men the same question. So the next time a doctor hands you a clipboard before doing anything to your body, that small piece of paper is not paperwork. It's the only thing standing between medicine as it should be and medicine as it once was. 400 men paid for that piece of paper with their own bodies. Most of them never even knew what they were paying for. They just knew someone had finally offered them a free exam and a decent burial. It should never have cost them anything more than that. It cost some of them everything, and it quietly cost the rest of us the ability to ever fully trust the system meant to protect us. Somewhere in that trade, a piece of paper became the least the world could offer back. It's a small thing to carry the weight of 400 men, but it's the only thing anyone ever built for them.